You know that feeling when you're stepping into a tense conversation, maybe with a romantic partner or maybe a colleague, and you just desperately wish you had a literal piece of paper in your hand?
Oh, yeah, a cheat code.
Exactly. A script telling you the exact perfect sequence of words to, make them understand your side without starting a massive fight.
It's a very human impulse, honestly. We're constantly searching for the cheat codes to connection. I mean, we want emotional friction to be as predictable as a computer program. Input the perfectly crafted therapy speak, output the flawless, conflict-free relationship.
But then you actually try it. You use one of those highly optimized, gentle-sounding phrases you read online, and boom,
Right.
the situation somehow blows up in your face anyway. The script completely fails. So today, we're throwing out the illusion of the flawless script. We're taking a deep dive into the actual mechanical psychology of
And
relationships.
we have a really fascinating stack of sources for this.
We do. We're pulling from clinical frameworks on Simply Psychology in the B17 portal, social media boundary toolkits from Lemon 8, Wikipedia's breakdown of assertiveness, a GeekWire commentary on a viral CEO, and surprisingly, cutting-edge tech research on the AI trust paradox.
Yeah, that AI connection is wild
Yeah.
because to figure out why our human scripts fail, we have to look at the absolute foundational mechanics of how we connect.
Right. Our mission today is to extract the ultimate beginner's guide to building healthy relationships. We're keeping it simple, breaking down personal responsibility, actionable boundary scripts, and genuine vulnerability. And spoiler alert, it's going to lead us straight into the bizarre ways human connection is currently mirroring our relationship with artificial intelligence.
It really is a striking parallel, but to even begin understanding why a communication script fails, we have to look at the foundation the script is built on, because if your underlying stance in a relationship is unstable, the words you use simply do not matter. And in the clinical literature, particularly the framework developed by psychotherapist Manuel Smith, that foundation comes down to a very specific, often misunderstood concept.
Assertiveness.
Exactly, assertiveness.
Right. And Smith's model is fascinating because he doesn't just define what assertiveness is. He defines the two dysfunctional extremes we usually default to instead. And I gotta say, they are brutal to recognize in yourself.
Oh, completely.
The first extreme is the passive stance. This is where someone actively, though, sometimes unconsciously, takes on the role of the victim.
Right. The mechanism behind the passive stance is fundamentally about offloading risk. If you're driven by a lack of self-confidence or a profound fear of change, well, making a firm decision is terrifying because you might be wrong.
So you just let the other person decide everything.
You let the other person drive. And the underlying psychological transaction here operates on the principle of you owe me because I am weak, and the weak need to be supported.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on that a little bit. You owe me because I'm weak. Sounds like a really harsh way of describing someone who might just be, I don't know, genuinely struggling or overwhelmed.
It does sound harsh, but it's crucial to separate a genuine request for help from a persistent behavioral strategy.
Huh. Hey.
We're talking about passivity as a manipulation tactic here. It's the difference between saying, I'm drowning, please throw me a life preserver, and living your entire life refusing to learn how to swim so that someone else is obligated to carry you.
Wow.
Yeah. The passive stance uses helplessness as a currency to buy compliance and avoid taking responsibility for the direction of their own life.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it as a long-term strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, you have the aggressive stance. So if the passive person uses helplessness as currency, the aggressive person uses dominance. Their operating principle is, you owe me because I am strong.
Precisely. They're trying to bend the environment and the people in it to their will. It can be loud and overt, like yelling, or it can be a very quiet, subtle coercion. But the goal is to dictate the terms of the relationship entirely on their own behalf.
Okay, let's unpack this with a simple analogy because I want to make sure this is super clear for anyone just starting to explore relationship psychology. Operating a relationship is basically like driving a car.
Okay, I like that.
Passivity is letting someone else drive and constantly complaining about the route from the passenger seat. Aggression is trying to violently grab the steering wheel while you're in the passenger seat, which means assertiveness is just calmly driving your own car.
That's a perfect way to visualize it, driving your own car. But Smith's actual definition of assertiveness honestly sounds a bit shocking at first.
This really does.
He defines the assertive principle as, I owe you nothing, you owe me nothing, we are partners.
Yeah, I have to be honest. If I told my partner, hey, I owe you nothing, They would probably pack their bags. I mean, it sounds incredibly cold.
It sounds cold because we're culturally conditioned to view romantic obligation as a measure of love. We equate "I need you" with "I love you."
Oh, totally.
But psychologically speaking, Smith is arguing for ultimate autonomy. What he means is that a healthy partnership is not a hostage situation. You aren't fulfilling a contractual debt. You're taking absolute personal responsibility for your own behavior, your own choices, and your emotions.
Right.
When you operate from "we owe each other nothing," it means every act of care, every compromise, is a voluntary choice made by two sovereign individuals. It removes resentment completely. That's how taking responsibility actually strengthens the relationship.
That is a total paradigm shift. It's the difference between doing the dishes because you're terrified of a fight versus doing the dishes because you actively choose to contribute to a shared home.
Exactly.
But the sources mention that living this out is incredibly difficult because society installs these specific manipulative prejudices in us. What do those look like in real life?
Well, Smith identifies several fundamental assertive rights that we possess, alongside the societal prejudices designed to strip them away. Take the right to make mistakes. As an autonomous adult, you have the right to make a mistake and be personally responsible for fixing it.
Right.
But the manipulative prejudice we're taught from childhood is that mistakes are moral failures. The prejudice says if you make a mistake, you must feel overwhelming, debilitating guilt, and you must surrender your decision-making power to someone else because you can no longer be trusted.
Oh, wow. Or what about the right to change your mind? That one hit me hard in the reading. We have this deep-seated prejudice that if you change your stance on something, you're flaky or incompetent or untrustworthy.
Yes.
You're expected to profusely apologize for growing or receiving new information. But if you take responsibility for your right to change your mind, you stop expecting your partner to manage the fallout of your growth.
Exactly. Or consider the right to simply say, "I don't understand." The manipulative prejudice there is the expectation of mind reading. You're supposed to naturally anticipate your partner's unstated needs, and if you can't, well, it proves you're callous and unloving.
Yeah.
Reclaiming these rights, owning your mistakes, asking for clarity without shame, that is what actually builds the foundation where healthy communication can happen.
But taking responsibility for our own actions naturally leads to the need to communicate our limits to our partners, which means we have to talk about boundaries.
Yes, we do.
But how do we do that without sounding like a dictator? Because this is where the scripts usually start to fail. People confuse setting a boundary with issuing an ultimatum. And from the Simply Psychology source, the distinction between the two is huge.
It's the difference between defense and offense.
Right.
Boundaries are about personal power. They're a limit you set around your own behavior and your own environment to protect your well-being. Ultimatums, on the other hand, are about force. They're a threat designed to control the other person's behavior.
Let me try another metaphor here. A boundary is like building a property line fence around your yard. It dictates what you will allow inside your space. An ultimatum is taking a battering ram to your neighbor's front door to force them to change how they decorate their living room.
That is a highly illustrative metaphor. The fence keeps you safe. The battering ram seeks to control the neighbor.
Let's look at the specific examples from the source, because putting this into simple, practical terms really highlights the gap. Here's an ultimatum. If you don't quit your job to stay home with the kids, I'm filing for divorce.
Notice the mechanics of that sentence. It's coercive. It leaves no room for collaborative problem solving. It's just an outright attack on the other person's agency.
Right. Now here is a boundary addressing the exact same underlying frustration. I feel completely overwhelmed managing my career and the majority of the childcare. I need more support at home to make this work. If we can't find a solution together, I worry about the long-term sustainability of my health and our relationship.
The mechanism there is entirely different. The speaker is focusing on their own bandwidth, their own yard, to use your metaphor.
Yeah.
They're taking responsibility for their own exhaustion rather than simply punishing the partner for it. If we connect this to the bigger picture to actually structure these conversations, the B17 source introduces Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication framework, specifically the four-step model. It's incredibly effective for bypassing the brain's defensive triggers.
Let's walk through those 4 steps because this is where the practical scripts come in. Step 1 is stating a fact, completely free of evaluation or judgment. So instead of saying, "You are always so disrespectful," which is an attack, you say, "When you call me a hurtful name during an argument."
And that distinction is vital from a neurological standpoint. When you lead with an accusation like, you're disrespectful, the listener's amygdala, the fear and threat center of the brain, it immediately flares up. They go straight into fight or flight mode.
Right.
But a pure observable fact does not trigger that same defensive flare.
Then step 2 is naming your emotion. I feel angry. Step 3 is stating your need, because I need our communication to feel safe and warm. And step 4 is a concrete, actionable request. So I'm asking that we do not use name-calling when we disagree. Fact, emotion, need, request.
It systematically dismantles the potential for a screaming match. It requires the speaker to own their feelings rather than blaming the partner for them.
And if you're looking for simple, everyday ways to practice this, the Lemonade Community Sources had some brilliant low-stakes boundary phrases, like to give our listeners a practical toolkit. For example, instead of letting resentment build when someone is consistently late, you can say, I really value your commitment to this project and being on time means a lot to me.
That's great.
Or simply replacing the passive phrase, I don't mind, when you actually do mind, with a calm, that doesn't work for me.
Those are perfect micro examples of taking personal responsibility. You aren't demanding the other person change, you're simply stating your reality.
But I have to ask the difficult, messy reality question here. What if I do all the work? I read the books, I use the 4-step framework, I use the gentle lemonade phrasing, I build a beautiful property line fence, and my partner still reacts like I just hit them with a battering ram. What if we use these perfect scripts, but our partner still receives our healthy boundary as a toxic ultimatum?
Then you've uncovered a crucial piece of information about the relationship, but it does not mean your boundary failed.
Oh, really?
Really. Your responsibility ends at the respectful, clear delivery of your limits. You cannot control the internal emotional processing of another human being. If they interpret your autonomous boundary as a threat, they're operating from that aggressive or passive stance we discussed earlier. They are demanding that you manage their discomfort.
Wow. The psychology sources also point out a really hard truth about ultimatums here. Usually, if a relationship is devolved into screaming ultimatums, it's because earlier, quieter boundaries were repeatedly ignored and absolutely no consequences were enforced.
Exactly. A boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. If you say, I will not stay in the room if you yell at me, but you stay seated every single time they raise their voice, your boundary is an illusion.
Yeah.
You're teaching them that your words are empty. Eventually, the resentment builds so high that you grab the battering ram in sheer desperation.
Which means enforcing a boundary requires us to be incredibly honest about when we are hurting and what we can actually tolerate. We have to drop the facade that everything is fine. And that brings us to a terrifying psychological mechanism. The paradox of vulnerability.
It is one of the most counterintuitive aspects of human behavior. The paradox states that to the person exposing a flaw, admitting a mistake, or showing emotional pain, the act feels like an unbearable display of weakness. But to the people witnessing it, it is almost universally perceived as a display of profound strength, courage, and changeworthiness.
The sources give a great example of this. A young manager whose team is facing a crisis. Now, the traditional corporate script says, never show weakness, pretend you have the answers, fake until you make it.
Right.
But instead, this manager sits the team down and says, I'm not sure what to do, I am completely stuck, and I need your help to figure this out.
Evolutionarily, we are wired to respond to that. By temporarily lowering their status and admitting a deficit, the manager signals to the group that there's no hidden agenda. It bypasses suspicion. It invites collaborative problem solving because the team feels safe to also share their incomplete ideas.
But because human beings are incredibly observant, people eventually realize that vulnerability acts as a shortcut to trust. And as soon as something is recognized as a tool, well, people try to manufacture it. They try to fake the vulnerability to get the trust without taking the actual emotional risk.
This raises an important question. What happens when vulnerability is weaponized or performative? This is where the GeekWire commentary regarding Braden Wallach, infamously known as the crying CEO, provides a perfect case study.
Oh, the LinkedIn guy. For anyone who missed this wild moment on social media, this CEO had just overseen a round of layoffs. Real people lost their real livelihoods. And shortly after, he posts a close-up selfie on LinkedIn, tears visibly streaming down his face, with a long caption about how incredibly agonizing the layoffs were for him.
The internet's immune system rejected it immediately and aggressively. People found it cringeworthy, tone-deaf, and highly manipulative. But the interesting analytical question is why it failed the vulnerability test, considering he was technically showing raw emotion.
Right. If crying is vulnerable, why did everyone hate him for it?
Because the display was fundamentally self-serving. True vulnerability is about decentering yourself to make room for authentic connection. The CEO did the exact opposite. He hijacked the emotional space that rightfully belonged to the employees who had just lost their jobs, and he centered his own distress.
Unbelievable.
He demanded sympathy from the very people his actions had harmed. It was a marketing strategy disguised as a human moment.
The commentary nailed it when they said, true vulnerability isn't found in a poorly timed public emotional breakdown. It's found in the quiet, unglamorous daily acts of accountability. Deep listening, taking the hit for your team, acknowledging when you were wrong, making room for others.
Context and intent matter immensely. When you utilize the aesthetics of vulnerability, the tears, the therapy speak, as a PR strategy, people subconsciously sense the disconnect between the script and reality. They realize they're being managed, not engaged with.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This exact phenomenon, this disconnect between a perfect script and genuine reality, is no longer just a human psychology problem. It is currently the most urgent crisis in the technology sector. It's known as the AI trust paradox.
It is a stunning parallel. To fully grasp the AI trust paradox, we have to look at the mechanics of how artificial intelligence evolved. For decades, computer scientists wrestled with something called Moravec's paradox.
Moravec's paradox essentially states that what is hard for humans is easy for computers, and what is easy for humans is nearly impossible for computers, right?
Precisely. Early AI could effortlessly compute high-level mathematics or beat grandmasters at chess things that require immense human cognitive effort. But it severely struggled with basic sensory-motor skills or simple conversational nuance, things a human toddler does naturally.
So for a long time, talking to a computer felt undeniably robotic. The scripts were clunky, you never forgot you were talking to a machine.
But the advent of advanced large language models, or LLMs, fundamentally changed that equation. According to the research highlighted in our sources, specifically Christopher Foster McBride's work, these models have largely solved the conversational hurdle. They have achieved an incredibly high degree of verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude. Explain the mechanics of that, because it's more than just sounding nice.
Verisimilitude means having the appearance of truth. Under the hood, an LLM doesn't know anything. It is an incredibly complex statistical engine predicting which word or token should naturally come next based on vast amounts of human data. Because it has digested millions of human conversations, psychology textbooks, and therapy transcripts, it can mathematically predict the exact sequence of words that sounds the most empathetic, the most contextually aware, and the most human.
Which creates the trap. Because the AI is so fluid, because it uses the four-step communication framework perfectly and mirrors our emotions with flawless verisimilitude, we experience a cognitive bypass. We're evolutionarily hardwired to equate fluent, empathetic language with a trustworthy, conscious intent. But the AI has no intent.
And that is the core of the AI trust paradox. The profound fluency of the language leads directly to drastically misplaced human trust. The models are so good at sounding confident and empathetic that when they generate incorrect information, what the industry calls hallucinations, humans are entirely ill-equipped to spot the lie. We trust the delivery, so
we swallow the fabricated facts. It's the exact same dynamic as dating a highly toxic but incredibly smooth-talking partner.
Exactly.
Think about it. You meet someone, and they know all the right buzzwords. They validate your trauma, they set boundaries, they deploy perfect performative vulnerability. Their script is flawless. But if their underlying actions, their actual track record of behavior, are entirely fabricated, that fluency isn't a feature, it is a weapon. In both AI and human relationships, fluency does not equal reliability.
That is the exact underlying mechanism. And the solution in the tech world mirrors the solution in human psychology. To mitigate the AI trust paradox, developers can't just make the AI sound nicer. They have to implement verifiable alignment structures. They have to anchor the model's outputs to factual reality through transparent human feedback. It requires accountability.
So, bringing this all together, for you listening, what is the ultimate relationship toolkit here? If we want to build healthier connections, we have to stop relying on finding the perfect script.
We have to focus on the foundation. Whether you are dealing with a human partner, a friend, or an AI language model, trust cannot be sustained by words alone. The toolkit requires asserting your autonomy, taking responsibility for your own side of the street, recognizing you are a partner, not a victim or a dictator.
Right.
It requires setting boundaries around your own yard rather than taking a battering ram to theirs, focusing on your needs rather than attacking the other person. And it demands genuine, accountable, other-focused vulnerability, not performative tears.
You have to actually stand behind the words with real accountability. Which leaves me with a final, maybe slightly unsettling thought for you to chew on. As these AI models get exponentially better at verisimilitude, they are soon going to be integrated into our daily communications. We will have AI drafting our difficult text messages, automatically generating the perfect, conflict-free boundary script for us to send to our partners.
Oh.
But if we outsource the messy, uncomfortable work of finding our own words to a machine, what happens to us? Do we eventually lose our organic human ability to navigate the friction of real intimacy? A healthy relationship isn't built on having a flawless vocabulary. It's built on the continuous, sometimes messy human choice to stumble over your words and to choose to stand behind them anyway. Think about that the next time you find yourself wishing someone would just hand you the perfect script.